Hey, I'm Blair Best. It's Thursday here on The Story, and tonight we answer a question that several of you have asked. Do members of Congress still get paid, even though they're the reason for the government shutdown? Plus, big changes coming to SNAP payments and eligibility, impacting hundreds of thousands of Oregonians that get the benefits. What you need to know. But first, several developments regarding the lawsuit meant to stop the National Guard deployment to Portland. What to know ahead of tomorrow's hearing. It's our big story tonight. Okay, we begin tonight with a live look outside of the ICE building in South Portland. So that's what the scene looks like right now. Our crew on the ground tells us there are roughly 10 people there and things are peaceful. They say there is a drone flying around as well as a helicopter circling the area. President Trump has said the building is under attack and has repeatedly referred to Portland as a, quote, war zone. So he ordered 200 members of the Oregon National Guard to Portland for 60 days to protect federal property and personnel. Tonight, those Guard members are training at Camp Rylea in Warrenton on the North Oregon coast. It's not clear when they could arrive in town. Governor Tina Kotek says the cost of the mission is in the neighborhood of $10 million to be paid for by federal tax dollars. Okay, despite President Trump posting on social media yesterday that National Guard troops are, quote, in place in Portland, we have not seen any troops at the ICE building or around town. Today, I went back down to the ICE building after our crews witnessed tensions rising between protesters and federal agents Wednesday night. It's quiet Thursday morning outside the federal ICE building in South Portland.
Just kind of a rainy morning in Portland with a couple people out doing what they can.
Jack, who's been protesting for months,
and it's evolved,
wears the message he wants to send.
It kind of dismantles their narrative that we're some radical terrorist organization. Like, we're just kind of Portlanders keeping Portland weird.
Jack says the protest escalates at night. A video taken by a KGW crew Wednesday shows one person being pepper sprayed, and later, a group of federal agents walk toward the crowd, shields drawn, grabbing one person and pulling him inside. A Fox News correspondent then posted these images on social media. There's footage from the roof of the federal building, as well as images of what appears to be that same person agents took from the crowd. We've blurred his face because ICE has not responded to our questions about the detainment. On Wednesday, Portland Police Chief Bob Day was on CNN responding to President Trump's deployment of the National Guard.
And do you believe having them there is necessary? Do you need them there?
No, just as you highlighted a moment ago, we're talking about one city block in 145 square miles. Certainly been some challenges down at the facility. Portland Police has been engaged down there extensively over the last 9 months. We've made over 20 arrests ourselves. We've conducting assault investigations ongoing.
According to the FBI Thursday, there has been one arrest in the last 24 hours for destruction of property, with 27 active and pending investigations.
We are not tolerating violence or vandalism, illegal behavior, but we also are huge proponents of free speech and for people to be able to travel freely and safely about the city.
Are you going to arrest this old lady? I must have made him mad.
Johanna King lives in senior housing.
I don't know where to even start.
Not far from the ICE building.
I had my kids over here for dinner. We were upstairs in the 24th floor and we saw these helicopters going by.
That was Sunday.
We decided to go down to have a look, see what was happening.
Johanna says she was standing on public property when her family started shouting at federal agents.
A bunch of these black clothed fellows appeared behind the gate, about 10 or 12 of them, a big crowd. So we thought, oh, something's going to happen. And so the kids started taunting them. Hey, are you going to arrest this old lady? And we thought that was pretty funny.
Shortly after, they were hit with what she described as pepper spray.
And no warning whatsoever. Suddenly, I started choking and coughing and coughing and coughing, and my daughter is sneezing and coughing. And
she believes it was federal agents who pepper sprayed them.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. Yeah, we walked back. I'm coughing the whole way. I'm still coughing a little.
Johanna,
I'm a photographer, I think I mentioned,
has been documenting protests for decades.
I have a whole bunch of pictures, including me I'm standing over the line here, And I said to my daughter, take some pictures of me. And I've been through this before, you know. I'm old enough at 86 to have seen, number one, demonstrating is really important. Standing up for the rights of yourself and other people, it's really important. You have to do it. And secondly, it makes a difference in the long run.
So yesterday, a Portland woman made her first appearance in federal court, charged with a felony for allegedly assaulting law enforcement at the ICE building. Court documents say that on Tuesday night, 39-year-old Catherine Megan Vogel allegedly put red paint on the driveway of the ICE building. Federal officers stopped her and took her inside for questioning for defacing federal property. She then allegedly hit one of the agents in the jaw. In a statement, the U.S. Attorney for the District of Oregon says violence and property damage at the ICE building or any other federal building will not be tolerated. If you assault a federal law enforcement officer or damage federal property, you will be arrested and federally prosecuted. So since mid-June, the U.S. Attorney's Office has charged 28 people with federal crimes for offenses related to the ICE building. As for Vogel, she has been released until her next court date. If convicted, she could face up to 8 years in federal prison. And let's pause on that topic of arrests, detainments, and charges for alleged crimes at and near the ICE facility. And figuring out who is in charge and what happens after someone is taken into custody is not always straightforward. Here's why. At times, protesters are interacting with city police, county deputies, or federal agents, and each agency handles arrests differently. That makes it harder for the public and journalists to track exactly what's happening. And most of the video that you've seen of law enforcement around the ICE building involves federal officers who are responsible for securing that facility and enforcing federal law around that building. Now, that includes relatively minor charges like trespassing and more serious offenses like assaulting law enforcement. But our reporting has found that in many cases, those taken into custody are not formally charged. That's why you might hear about an arrest in the moment, but never see a follow-up in a courtroom. Okay, one example, the case we just told you about. The U.S. Attorney told us about her court appearance today from the incident that happened Tuesday night. But we also got a statement from the Department of Homeland Security saying 6 people had been arrested for various offenses Tuesday night, but they offered no names or details. Okay, without names, we can't track them in the federal system. And if they're not booked at the Multnomah County Jail, well, we don't know if they're still in custody. Well, all eyes will be on the federal courthouse in downtown Portland tomorrow morning for an emergency hearing on the state of Oregon's lawsuit looking to stop the deployment of the National Guard to the Rose City. Kyle Boshi is outside the ICE building. Kyle, there's already been movement in the case when it comes to the judge who will oversee things and eventually make a ruling. So fill us in.
So this case was originally assigned to Judge Michael Simon. He was going to oversee the case, including the hearing tomorrow. But today, the Trump administration filed a motion for recusal, essentially asking Judge Simon to step aside because he's married to Congresswoman Suzanne Bonamici. The Oregon Democrat has been outspoken against the Trump administration's deployment of federal troops in Oregon. Within hours of that motion being filed, notice was posted by the court that the case had been reassigned to Judge Karen Immigrant. Now, you may recognize that name. That's because she was a former U.S. attorney here in Oregon before becoming a Multnomah County judge. In 2019, President Trump appointed her to the federal bench. This change, while interesting, really doesn't change much about the case itself. It'll still be heard at the same place and same time tomorrow, federal courthouse at 10 a.m.
So Kyle, have any arguments on either side of the case been filed with the court yet? Any insight there?
Yeah, so the state of Oregon initially filed, the Attorney General's office filed that seeking a temporary restraining order, essentially putting the brakes on the deployment of federal troops in Oregon. Their argument that this is an unlawful move, also that it may harm the city of Portland and the state of Oregon. An opposing view comes from the Trump administration. It was filed this morning, essentially saying, no, it is okay, it is lawful. They also point to some of the damage that's been done to the immigration office behind me and some of the officers that have been injured.
Kyle, are we expecting a ruling tomorrow morning, or could the deployment potentially begin before a ruling comes down?
So that's really anyone's guess. We don't know what the judge will do or when that decision will be made. The judge could rule from the bench right there and then, or could wait hours, even days. It's really up to the judge to make that decision. But it could have a drastic impact on whether troops are deployed in the city of Portland. So we'll be watching very closely.
Okay, Kyle Aboshi in South Portland tonight. Kyle, thank you. Today, Portland Mayor Keith Wilson wrote a letter in Time magazine opposing the president's order to deploy the National Guard and instead calling for the federal government to come back to the table to partner on things like housing and education, writing that the feds are retreating from its responsibilities in those areas. The mayor writes, "We must recognize that the American consensus on Portland was purposefully broken and it's hurting our city. That perception was shattered by the 24-hour ecosystem of divisive clips, some new, most from a half-decade ago, all intended to feed anger and division. This ugly ecosystem cannot build togetherness and it cannot serve the shared interests of our nation. It can only hold us back." He also referenced President Trump's post on social media Saturday morning authorizing troops to use, quote, full force if necessary. Mayor Wilson writes, "We do not ask, but demand to know what the authorization of full force means to Portlanders. As mayor, should I tell our teachers to teach and our workers to work and our parents to parent like any other day? Or should I tell our hospitals and morgues to prepare for the unthinkable?" If you'd like to read the mayor's full letter, you can find a link on our website, kgw.com. Today, Washington Governor Bob Ferguson signed an executive order creating stronger protections for immigrants in Washington state, protecting their personal data from ICE. It's in response to a months-long investigation by our colleagues at King 5 in Seattle, who revealed this summer that Washington's Department of Licensing was sharing drivers' personal data, including license plates, with ICE. That information was then used for immigration enforcement. The governor's order mandates all state agencies review their data sharing practices, require they treat personal information as a matter of public interest and safety, and creates an immigration subcabinet to suggest statewide policy changes. Immigration advocates have praised the move.
We know that this is being used to target people and pick them up and separate families and terrorize individuals. And it's one step in us taking back some power, right? And saying you can't use our data to target us. Feels like there's still some hope, right? Even though there's not a lot we can control at the federal level, at least our state is stepping up and stepping in the way that we're asking them to.
The order takes effect immediately and requires agencies to notify people if their data is at risk. Meanwhile, a federal judge ruled that some migrants being held in the immigration detention facility in Tacoma have the right to request to be released on bond. The judge ruled a Trump administration policy denying those bond hearings for jailed migrants is unlawful. The judge said that for certain immigrants, holding them without the possibility of a bond hearing violates the Immigration and Nationality Act. Immigration judges at the Tacoma Detention Center have long denied bond requests by migrants. When this lawsuit was originally filed back in March, national data showed the Tacoma immigration judges granted bond in just 3% of cases where it was requested, marking the lowest bond rate in the country at facilities like the one in Tacoma, according to the judge's order. The judge also wrote that under the Trump policy, even those with strong ties to the community and no criminal records were no longer eligible for a bond hearing. Okay, it's important to note that according to the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, this ruling only applies to the Tacoma facility, not all detention centers across the country. Though there is a similar lawsuit in California that hopes to change the rule for all immigrants in ICE detention. Well, coming up next on the story, the president's big, beautiful bill has some big changes on the way for hundreds of thousands of Oregonians who receive SNAP benefits, commonly known as food assistance. The warning from rural leaders facing state lawmakers in Salem this week. That's when the story returns. About 750,000 people in Oregon rely on SNAP benefits, also known as food stamps. But soon, there'll be changes to who is eligible, affecting hundreds of thousands of Oregonians, according to the state. Those changes are thanks to President Trump's big, beautiful bill. Part of the bill aims to reduce federal spending on nutrition programs by about $187 billion over the next 10 years. Now, what it means here in Oregon is that for some people, monthly payment amounts may be reduced, and some may lose eligibility for SNAP altogether. The Oregon Senate Committee on Health Care met this week to see how things will change here. Now, one of the most noteworthy is work requirements. Now, able-bodied adults without dependents will have to prove they've worked at least 80 hours a month, or they lose benefits. Before the law passed, veterans, people aging out of foster care, and homeless people were exempt. That's no longer the case, except for some tribal members. The requirement applies for people age 18 to 64, up from 54 before the law. It's already started in 6 counties, and next year the rule goes into effect statewide. Marcy McMurphy, who runs a food assistance program in Eastern Oregon, told the committee people in rural and frontier counties may not be able to meet that requirement.
There aren't enough living wage jobs, especially not part-time work that meets that strict hour requirements. There are a lot of people that want to work that live out here. However, a lot of the jobs that they're qualified aren't available. So if they're not available, how can they then turn around and do the work to meet this requirement?
Oregon's Department of Human Services says 1 in 6 Oregonians are currently relying on SNAP, most of them in rural counties. The average household gets around $313 a month. The average person, $183. Now, under the federal bill, refugees, people seeking asylum, and other legal non-citizens are no longer eligible for SNAP. Senator Lisa Reynolds, who's a doctor representing West Portland and parts of Washington County, says she's worried about the impact of these changes.
I am choked up and I'm nauseated, and I think about my patients, and I think about what it means for a child to go hungry when we think about them not being able to reach their full potential. And so I did a little digging last night on HR 1, and this is from the Congressional Budget Office. Households in the top 10% under HR 1, and these are households making $200,000 to $300,000 a year, will see an average annual gain under HR 1 of $12,000 a year. Lower income households, like the bottom 10%, the numbers you were talking about, $15,000 to $18,000 a year, will lose on average $1,600 a year, which actually in a weird way doesn't sound like that much, but we know what that means to people when it comes to food benefits and access to health care.
Now, on top of this, the law shifts more of the administrative burden onto the state. So the Oregon Department of Human Services says their staff will have an added workload. Now, what that means for you is longer call times, and they say their ability to respond to problems will be limited. Governor Tina Kotek sent out a statement saying, in part, the federal cuts to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, are simply wrong, and they will hurt Oregon families. I strongly oppose these changes. Our top priority now is making sure every impacted Oregonian knows what's changing and where to turn for help. Today is the second day of the federal government shutdown. Neither side is showing signs of a deal. Republicans and Democrats are hung up, mainly on health care issues. No votes are scheduled in Congress until tomorrow afternoon. Thousands of federal workers are either furloughed or working without pay. And the Trump administration says thousands could soon lose their jobs permanently. Many of you are unhappy about the situation. We got this voicemail yesterday.
How absurd is it that they shut down and don't go to work? We don't get paid because they don't go to work, but they get paid because they can't make up their minds. That's absurd.
Today, Kathy asked about that same thing, saying, are members of Congress receiving paychecks during government shutdown? The answer is yes. Members of Congress and the president are paid during a government shutdown. That's because their pay is protected under the Constitution, Article 1, Section 6, to be exact. Most members of Congress, by the way, get paid $174,000 a year, although lawmakers in leadership posts get more. Several lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have asked not to be paid during the shutdown, including Oregon Congresswoman Janelle Bynum. She wrote, "I do not think it would be right for me to continue to be paid while many public servants in Oregon are not receiving their salaries through no fault of their own. Washington's dysfunction is unacceptable, and Oregonians have had enough. Until both parties come to the table, do their job, and reopen the government, members of Congress should not receive pay." We're back right after this. Well, Oregon's new statewide test scores are out, and they show Portland students making small gains, while also highlighting how far schools still have to go to catch up to pre-pandemic levels. Oregon's biggest district saw improvements across the board, with English and math both up small percentage points. Portland Public Schools is now above its pre-pandemic math levels and just below pre-pandemic English scores. But statewide, results show that schools are still far from reaching 2018 and 19 levels. District leaders say they'll keep using the data to identify shortcomings, address equity gaps, and support students.
I believe we see, again, the most room for improvement for our COVID babies as they matriculate through school. We're trying to do a lot of academic recovery. That's why we continue to provide summer acceleration programming and things like that for targeted students.
In Salem-Keizer, the state's second biggest district, English scores are up for many grade levels, and there was a slight improvement in math as well. Okay, artificial intelligence is becoming more and more common in our everyday lives. And now, the Washington County Sheriff's Office is going to use the technology to help them write police reports. It's part of a 60-day pilot program of a service called Draft One. It transcribes audio from body cam footage, spitting out a police report based on what can be heard. Right now, a select few deputies are trying it out for calls such as DUI, theft, and trespassing. However, any deputy can currently use it for non-criminal calls, like crash reports. Corporal David Huey says in his experience, the program has been very accurate and adds there are safeguards in place to ensure reports are factual.
It's going to force the deputy to interact with all the different parts of the report to make sure that it is true and accurate. And then there's a minimum of 20% of the report that the deputy has to adjust or make fixes to.
Huey says all of the data from the body-worn camera transcripts and report drafts are securely stored within the Axon network, which is the body cam company. At the end of the 60-day pilot program, the Washington County DA and Sheriff's Office will determine if it will be implemented long-term. Okay, that's the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. Have a great Thursday night. I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.